Hello and welcome to NARC Live on Wednesday the 20th of November 2024. Coming to you live from Norfolk on the east coast of England with Tammy M0TC.
Hello.
And me, David G7URP. Lovely to see you. On tonight's show, Roger G3KMA on 60 years of IOTA. We've got club news and views. And we find out what on earth this is. We've only had a few entries to this, so if you're looking at that now and you think, I know what that is, then pop it onto BATC or on Facebook Live and we'll reveal all in a little while. Firstly, we come to club news, and it's coming up to the last chance to order your Christmas dinner with NARC. We've been taking these orders now since the middle of October, and we have to submit everything, or I do, by the end of November. So the deadline for booking the Christmas dinner is next Wednesday at CNS when we're meeting. So if you haven't got round to it by then. But as you know, on the last few newsletters, there's been a copy of the booking form and all the details they have to pay. Or if you really would rather, you can come to the school next Wednesday night and fill in a form and give the cash, and that will be it. So that's the deadline. For the night, of course, is on Wednesday, the 18th of December, a week before Christmas. There's a 3-course dinner. It's club subsidised to £15, and all you have to do is buy drinks on the night. So we hope that lots of more people will book. We've got quite a few people already, but we've got quite a few spaces as well in the private room that we've booked. So please, that is the deadline, a week tonight. But feel free to book it online. All the details on the last newsletters. Similarly, NARC 2025 membership is now due. If you're already a member, all you have to do is simply send the money to the bank, to the NARC bank. Just put your call sign and your reference, or your surname if you're not licensed. And these are the details here. But all those details, again, have been in lots of newsletters recently. And it's just £10 for the whole of the year. Now, excuse me, if you're not a member already and you'd like to join, then you can join from now and still pay £10 for the rest of this year as well as next year. Very cheap membership, I think you'll agree, for a club that does something at least every Wednesday, and then lots of other events and activities as well. If you are new, though, we'll ask you to fill in a membership form, which you can find on our website. Thank you. Now on to members news. I've got quite a few bits and pieces for you this week. James M0ZAH would like us to get his 6-metre repeater on the air. He says he's got most of the equipment now except the filters, but the filters are very expensive. Now this is the projected coverage map we're going to show you now. This is what James sent us. Now obviously that's on the most optimistic side, but you can see that covers, from what I can see, pretty much all of Norfolk in the blue, and surrounding areas a bit of that as well in the pink. So this is for a new 6-metre repeater. I don't remember there being a 6-metre repeater in Norfolk, at least not in any recent years. Now, we don't feel as a club that really is something that we can really support, because we'd have to support all the repeaters if we did. However, we do think it's something that we should encourage members to support, especially if you like 6 metres and you'd like to get out a bit further. It is a nice band after all. So if you'd like to support him on that, there's his email address there, james@calderwood.com. Contact him and say you'd like to make a donation. Any donation at all would be lovely. Or if you'd rather, you can contact James via me to support and just mention that it's about the 6-metre repeater. So good luck, James. I hope you managed to get the support. I know you've raised £350 so far, but the filters are around about £1,000, so there's still quite a bit to go. I really hope you can get that on the air. I'll support it myself. There we are. Put my money where my mouth is, literally. Next, a very interesting article came from Tom, GAXQD. It's a fascinating video linked to us by Tom. We can't show it all here because it's about 16 minutes long, but we thought we'd show you a couple of minutes of it, and then we're going to include the link for the YouTube video, the whole video, in this weekend's newsletter. So without further ado, play VT, please.
Despite what it looks like, this is not a magnet. Actually, it's something much more exotic. and the invisible field it emits is easily seen using this 5x5 detector array. But what exactly is the grid detecting? This video is sponsored by Factor Meals. Thank God, because I can't cook. Magnets are underrated. Using an invisible Jedi magnetic force, these little objects attract ferrous material, and their attraction is permanent. It's honestly remarkable, but is there an equivalent for static electricity? You know, an object with a permanent static charge. Instead of attracting only ferrous materials, an object which can attract everything else. After spending the past month digging into studies, poring over manufacturing techniques, and formulating my own recipes, there is such a thing. Let's get right to it. There are so many hidden gems of high voltage physics I've had my eyes open to in recent years. Things from levitation, ionic thrust, nebulography, nuclear fusion, to name a few. But electrets, they're in a class all of their own. Electrets are materials which can retain a semi-permanent electric charge, much like how magnets hold a magnetic field. Whereas a magnet has a north and south pole, these have a negative and positive side, meaning they produce permanent static electric fields. And we're all familiar with what a static electric field feels like. Electrets are really cool and have commercial uses I'll talk about later, but when it comes to the larger sizes, well, those are all experimental and you can't really buy them. And I wanted to make a big one. I got to work researching how exactly they're made, and fundamentally, it's pretty easy. An insulating material is melted, then placed between two electrodes charged to several thousand volts DC. Power is applied the entire time it cools and hardens, leading to a reorganization of charges within the material. That reorganizing comes in a few forms, the most common being molecules lined up in chains of positive.
Yeah, we've got to leave it there really because there's another 14 minutes, but we wanted to show you that bit because it really is interesting what he does. Even Tammy, dare I say, who I just sent you the link to and prepared the VT for that. You said it looks really fascinating and you've watched more of it as well.
I did watch about 10 minutes of it, and I thought I probably ought to be doing stuff.
Getting on with the other things. So it is going to be there. It's on the newsletter if you don't find it already. It's on the Plasmas channel. It's their copyright and on YouTube if you want to look at it before that. Tom says, electrets is something I believe all NARC members will be interested in, as the phenomenon is actually used in most current microphones we use for turning voice into electrical energy. And the older alternative microphones use the magnet and a coil rather than the static electric field. So really interesting. Thank you very much for sharing that, Tom. And look out for the link on this weekend's newsletter where you can download and watch the rest of that video. Now, finally, we've been sent a video by one of our members, Martin, G7UGB, who sent us this video with a very special message for James, M0UKS. Have a look at the video and then I'll tell you what his message is. He says, cool. Eat your heart out, James. Hope you are impressed. That looks lovely, doesn't it?
It does look cool.
So we're getting the challenges going now for Christmas, I think. Or do you know better? Do you have something better than that for Christmas that you're working out? As you know, James is very, very keen on his lights. And in fact, I don't know if you've gone along the A47 recently, but you might see those massive buildings they're putting up, which is for a power station, and that is actually rumoured to be put to power James's Christmas lights, I think. Anyway, thank you very much for sending us that video, Martin. Right, Tammy, over to you for Little People.
Yep, Little People, here you go. Have you ever wondered about cotton buds before?
No, doesn't worry me. Oh.
Is this how they're made or what they're used for?
You turn them then, do you?
Turn them to make them into vases.
That's good. Miniature-calendar.com. I like that. New picture every day, and Tammy picks one for us every week. Thanks, Tammy. So what have you been up to? We had a few bits of news from you members this week, but don't forget to keep in touch with us, please. We'll be meeting again on NARC Live in 2 weeks' time, and we love to see your videos and pictures and news, as you can see. So please do keep in touch. radio@dcpmicro.com is how you can send anything to us for the show or for the club, indeed. Now we move on to that competition that we set 2 weeks ago tonight when we asked you, what on earth is this? Now, has anybody, better check online.
Yeah, we've had one entry online.
Okay. Do you want to read that one out?
Yeah, Mike, G-A-E-Y, said it is a pretentious smoking tool which you put on your finger.
That's right, I just lost all sound in my earpiece, but we'll recover it later. Okay, and Bruce G3KMA says, I think the latest What on Earth could be a vintage cigarette holder.
Mark 20YUU. Is it a posh lady's monocle type thing?
Oh yeah, I can see that. Steve G3VA, in this week's What on Earth, it's a 1920 cigarette or cigar holder.
John G8VPE. My best guess is that it's a magnifying glass rather than an old monocle. Oh, sorry, rather like an old monocle on a handle to hold it close to one's eye.
And the answer is...
Dun, dun, dun. It is a cigarette
It is
holder.
a cigarette holder. Well done to those of you who got that right. 3 of you, I think. Colin M7OPB sent us that picture. Very posh. Very good.
It does look something like a posh thing from years gone by, I don't know.
It does. Thank you. So thanks for your entries. How are you going to do on this when we ask you, what on earth is this? I'll just say one thing. It's
No,
not a clue.
don't say it,
No,
clue.
no. When I saw that, I thought I knew what it was, but I didn't. That's all I'm going to say. That may or may not help
I
you.
know. It's a bit of kitchen roll.
Well, that might, yeah. Well,
There you go.
I come not understanding
Sorted.
on that. I might, yes, it's on a piece of kitchen roll.
Yep.
That might be the biggest clue you'll get, actually.
What? Kitchen roll?
Oh,
You're not allowed to give clues.
I'm not. I wouldn't dare. Anyway, if you know what that is, you've got just under 2 weeks to let us know. Send your answers to radio@dcpmicro.com by 3 o'clock on Wednesday week. And that'll be December by then, goodness
will.
me.
You've eaten our chocolate by then.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we have 7 chocolates anyway.
7.
Yeah, advent calendar if it's the 7th. Is it 7th for me?
All right, yeah.
Something like that. Anyway, do let us know what that is. Send your answers to radio@dcpmicro.com. If you know what it is now, why don't you send us an email now? Then you won't forget. Good one. Okay, so before we meet our guest tonight, let me say, yes, James M0UK says, Martin, I'm very impressed. He's put that on Facebook, he's watching. So there we are. Now, before we meet tonight's guest, let's just let you know what's happening in the club this week. We've got on Sunday the GB2RS News at 7 o'clock on GB3MB repeater. On Monday night, the 7th at 7:30, also on GB3MB, the Monday Night Net. It's also open to anyone to run that net, by the way, as well. Please don't just leave it to the same sort of people every week. So anybody's welcome to join or run that net. And 8 o'clock, the CW net on 3.543 megahertz. And then next Wednesday, November the 27th, we're going to be meeting at CNS School in person. And we've got Bright Sparks for our young members. And they'll be making an animated bell for their Christmas trees. Nice USB powered thing, kit, which I found. And they'll be making those. And it's also the last day for NARC Christmas dinner bookings. I did mention it earlier, but next Wednesday is the deadline because I've got to put a spreadsheet together, whatever everybody wants, and get that to the venue. So please bear that in mind. Also, of course, do keep in touch with your stories and your pictures and everything we love to see. And of course, we were very happy to send this card to anybody who you feel will be cheered by it. Just let us know their name and address. We'll add your name to ours and send it to them to radio@dcpmicro.com. Now, that's about it for this part of the programme. And now we're going to meet our special guest, who's Roger, G3KMA. We met him actually 4 years ago, and he's going to talk to us tonight about Islands on the Air. Hello, Roger.
Hello there. Hello, everyone.
Lovely to see you.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be here again.
Got to just ask before I know I'm not going to stop you with your presentation, but just weather-wise, it's obviously all in lots of people's minds now. What's the weather like down where you are? You're down south, I think, somewhere, but further south than us.
Down in Surrey, we've just had rain most of the day, but I noticed that the forecast for your area is not too good for tomorrow, so keep our fingers crossed.
That's right. We had a little bit of snow today, but anyway, lovely for you to join us, Roger. I'm going to leave you to your presentation, and as always to everybody at home, if you've got any questions or comments for Roger during the presentation or straight afterwards, then please do ask them on BATC and Facebook. But now over to you, Roger.
Okay, fine. Actually, I had thought I'd given my last talk on IOTA, My first one at the RSGB convention was in the late 1980s, and I've been back with a talk most years since. No, I won't mention one of my first at the NEC in Birmingham around that time. No one turned up except a gentleman, probably of my age now, 86, thinking it was a talk about jamboree on the air. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to help him. Right. What is IOTA? I know some of this covers the ground I mentioned 4 years ago, but let's maybe people who haven't heard this before. A lot of people still think that it is an RSGB program. It hasn't been since 2016. Islands on the Air, previously run by the Society, is now set up as a not-for-profit company limited by guarantee without share capital, with the RSGB as a partner. When did it start? 1964. What does it do? It promotes activity from islands, but more importantly, it promotes activity on the bands. And would we miss it? A lot of guys would, and without it, activity on the bands would drop. It's not alone as a program to generate activity. Summits on the air, parks, lighthouses, churches, mills, railways, youngsters, and one I saw at the convention, bunkers on the air. I still may have missed a few, but as active amateurs, we need to be very conscious of the fact that if we do not use the bands, we could lose them. So each month, when I see in Radcom a new on-the-air program, I say to myself, another baby is born. Go generate those expedition stations and activity. Jeff Watts was a leading shortwave listener who at the time published the very popular weekly DX news sheet, one of the first of the DX fraternity, for the DX fraternity. Jeff believed that the enjoyment by DXers operating from a rare DXEC country should be shared with those who had no such advantage. DXEC was an American program, and there had to be a way of spreading the training obtained from being at the sharp end of a DX pileup, not to mention the thrill. If the target could not be contacts for DXCC countries, then make it QSOs with large islands and island groups. He prepared a list of some 500 IOTAs, 194 of which could be numbered immediately because of resident or past operations. He developed a basic rule structure for the program, together with a range of certificates and an honor roll to reflect performance in contacting them. All records were kept manually. I still have the material here. And in the event, take-up was slow, with the main interest coming from shortwave listeners and a small number of amateurs, mainly in Europe, particularly Italy. What can be said about Jeff was that he had very high standards. No credit would be given without sight of a QSL card. A few amateurs tried to cheat with handwritten island names on QSLs, and it was the integrity he showed in dealing with this that we have tried to maintain ever since. In early 1985, Jeff suffered ill health and asked the RSGB to take over management of the IOTA program. At the time, I was on the HF committee, and when it was discussed, volunteered to take it on. The then HF committee chairman voiced the opinion, perhaps a little pessimistically, that if management of the program got too much, we could just let it wither away and die. I visited Jeff in Norwich in March 1985 to collect the records, the one and only occasion I met him. There followed a couple of days spent getting my head around what I had taken on. And later that week, the moment the guys received the weekly DX news sheet with the announcement that I would be the new manager, the telephone started ringing, first from Germany. What had I in mind for the program? Indeed, what had I in mind? Good question. Within a week or so, award applications started coming in from all over. Even before I had a chance to formulate any clear view other than the IOTA program must continue. The organizational work began, records, certificates, program promotion. Someone suggested an on-air meeting frequency and a time to make an appearance for the aficionados. And almost immediately, the IOTA net on 14260 was born. In the years following, it took the form of a forum for reporting IOTA stations worked, and increasingly, with the appearance of island stations, to give an IOTA to the assembled. Naturally, as the group grew, lots of ideas were aired, and of course, proposals for new IOTA groups. This is when the Inquisition, that's the Inquisition of me, if I was on frequency, started. One of my most interesting requests was from a scientist with access to a yacht over on the west coast of the USA, who suggested that we should include underwater islands. He was quite serious. He said, underwater islands, they have an edge, a border, it can be seen, and therefore you can identify the extremes of where the island extends to. And says, when I said, well, what about antennas and all that? He said, don't worry, Roger, we will sort that out. So that perhaps is one of the interesting stories I can remember now. It soon became clear that Jeff's rules needed a major revamp. A definition of what could be regarded as a qualifying island and how grouping of islands could reasonably be achieved, because we couldn't give a separate number to every island in the world. There are varying estimates of 500,000 to 1 million islands, depends the extent to which you count rocky crags and so on. And we also need, for a qualifying name, for it to be printed on the QSL card. We also made it clear that the island station must be land-based on the island and that the operator was there with it in control. I know things have changed over the last 5 years or so, and maybe we'll get on to discussing that later. Those of you who have read the IOTA directory will know that the rules are the most detailed of any award program ever issued, including DXCC. To say that elements in the rules didn't cause controversy would be a gross understatement. that only abated when we added notes in the directory to show where we were coming from. Yes, we made mistakes. One was to base a decision on adding an island group on whether it was shown and named in the National Geographic Atlas of the World. That was probably the best atlas of the worlds available at the time in 1985. This had lots of map plates covering Europe and North America, but far fewer of other continents. That was unfair. We moved to the Times Atlas of the World, which was significantly better, but still not meeting the level of fairness required. It became clear from the outset that we needed to include in the IOTA list coastal islands of each mainland country. We did our best, but it was a struggle, and the result was patchy. Surprisingly, we had real difficulty with Great Britain. None of this was easy. We were breaking new ground, and it took a while for the rules to bed down. Up to that time, I had been running the program single-handedly and was therefore an easy target. By 1990, the card-checking role had been split among several volunteers and country assistants, so IOTA was moving in the direction of being a bit more of a group effort, but not mea culpa in the framing of the rules. This was the first of 3 decades of real growth. The program was becoming well known internationally. And this brought problems, including an overseas takeover attempt. But it's probably best not to say too much about that. Up to around 1990, IOTA's status within RSGB had been rather amorphous. Technically part of the HF committee, but actually a free agent. It just didn't fit into the RSGB committee structure, because unlike other committees, it generated income, was in essence international, with responsibilities to RSGB non-members, and was actually a program where you were either completely in or completely out. The HF committee could not devote the necessary time to the daily management of a program so complex as IOTA. In the early 90s, this was regularized with the establishment of a formal IOTA committee along the lines of other RSGB committees. This enabled the committee to negotiate in 1994 the first commercial sponsorship agreement with Yaesu UK. The program's growing success caused the then RSGB General Manager in 1996 to take a more hands-on approach to IOTA and the income that it generated mainly from overseas non-members. My title was changed from IOTA Director to IOTA Manager, and a separate person as committee chair was appointed. This was a situation that was to last until 2016, when IOTA left the society by agreement. The early period was not easy, largely because of unrealistic expectations on the part of headquarters about IOTA's growth and financial potential, and arguments about the safeguarding of IOTA income for the program's use. Sufficient to say that it was a difficult time. IOTA records had gone through a rudimentary level of computerization in the late 1980s and early 1990s. And now, thanks to efforts of Dominic Smith, M0BLF, and Martin Atherton, G3ZAY, software for a more professional version of the database was brought online as part of the IOTA website. And this continued to be developed by them for a further 10 years or more. In 1996, we introduced a requirement that IOTA expeditions should, when asked, provide some form of validation of their operations. This was to emphasize IOTA's wish for the maintenance of high standards and integrity. Another instance of breaking new ground, and it's satisfying that it is now accepted practice. In 2000, we carried out a major revision. Actually, I'm a bit out of sync there. In 2000, we carried out a major revision of the IOTA island list. This involved checking that the existing listed islands did in fact qualify, and that any that didn't were deleted. Martin G3ZAY made hundreds of visits to the Cambridge University Library to check out maps covering every country with a coastline for qualifying islands. And the result was a list of 15,000 islands in the IOTA directory and the capping of IOTA groups at 1,200. This meant that some groups had just one island, or they may have over 100 islands. And this applied to particular areas like the Philippines or Asiatic Russia, or in Scandinavia, particularly Finland and Sweden's Norway. By the turn of the century, IOTA was well on the way to becoming the second most popular award program after DXCC. An indication of this was the extent to which expeditions now started to print IOTA reference numbers on their QSRs, and IOTA news items were widely published. We had made it. In 2006, RSGB HQ replaced Yaesu UK with ICON as IOTA's principal sponsor. It was for various reasons a relatively short-lived arrangement. The first QSO matching started in 2007 with the IOTA contest results. Another groundbreaking achievement. This meant that if you submitted an entry to the IOTA contest, that log would be held by RSGB, and we would then use it with their agreement for matching FQSOs. It did require that the applicant, the IOTA applicant, submitted his entry as well. In 2011, the RSGB board decided that it needed to address the future of IOTA, as there were questions as to the resilience of the program, given its complex rule structure and paucity of volunteers to run it. And progressively over the next 4 years, the subject rose higher up the board's to-do list until it reached the point of being registered on the RSGB risk register. Roger had made it, except he hadn't disappeared from the scene willingly, or should I say naturally. Then came a gallant night on a silver steed. Stan Lee, G4XXI. In 2015, Stan, at the time a member of the RSGB board, recognized that the only viable solution was to let IOTA go its own way, free of control by the RSGB, to make what it could of life outside the society. The case was quite balanced. On the one side, the society owned a remarkably popular program with worldwide appeal, albeit with a clientele of more RSGB non-members than members. But on the other side, the program needed a whole IT system rewrite if up-and-coming QSO matching was to be included. There was this cost, unquantified and unquantifiable, and at the same time a real problem how to strengthen the management team. The IOTA team itself was of the view that it would be easier to achieve these objectives outside RSGB. And that meant not placing a large financial burden on the society. For the society, the program had grown to be hugely popular worldwide, yet this was largely more outside the UK than within it. I have to mention here Japan, Germany, Italy, USA as the top 4 countries. In February 2016, Stan informed the board, I'm told somewhat to the surprise of a few members, that IOTA had been set up as a not-for-profit company in Companies House. The deed was done. It was agreed that RSGB would help with the transition with a seed grant and a promise of a loan if needed. In fact, the loan was not needed. We did not take it. An agreement followed which made the arrangement of RSGB with IOTA one of partnership. And publicity on this was given in Radcom. Now we raised with an appeal immediately after setting up as a company, an appeal for funds, and the community were very generous and provided sufficient funds for us to finance the rewrite of the IOTA software, the website, and the inclusion, first of all with Clublog, and then subsequently, a year or so later, by agreement with ARRL for QSO matching with Logbook of the World, LOTW. We have extended it slightly beyond that to cover some very easy groups which really will not require any validation because there are hundreds of amateurs in those groups. A multinational board was established with representatives from Canada, the USA, initially Germany and Belgium, and Japan. We get a lot of support from our Japanese board member. There was a complete rewrite of the program IT and website, and this is available to you The website address is on the last of the screens coming up. And a list of accepted operations was set up. We can't check or validate every rare operation. We do our best. And CESA V3LYC does a very useful job in asking for validation on the very rarest of operations. We will normally liaise with ARRL, and we won't duplicate things if they accept an operation. And there was a huge, because people wanted to see the extent of what we had done with QSO matching, we got a huge program growth in the years between 2016 to 2020. But what happened in 2020? Enter COVID. And this meant problems both from activity, fall down in activity of DXCC and IOTA, but also geopolitical and economic problems subsequently in the years 2022, 2023. Things are started to begin to recover for DXCC last year and increasingly this year, but it's slow going for IOTA, and we do want to see more of the rarer IOTA groups activated, because a lot of them have not been activated for a long time. It is, however, a matter of cost, because with the result of the inflation and so on, and various geopolitical problems around the world, things have got very expensive to run IOTA operations to some of the, particularly in uninhabited island groups. We set up last year IOTA De-Expedition Fund, which was able to provide funds for a number of operations. We have another one coming up from India, or two from India coming up next month, one of which is a new island group. So we are available if you've got an operation, you've identified an operation that will qualify. The criteria are on the website. Then a grant you may very well be able to seek and obtain a grant. Current objectives, obviously, to increase activity on the bands. That really is our prime purpose of existence, is to increase activity on the bands, to restore IOTA growth rate, stimulating operations from the rarer IOTA groups, and providing a new initiative for chasers, particularly ones coming up through the ranks, the younger element, and finding volunteers with the skill to help run the program. We do need support to help run the program. Challenges: facing up to environmental restrictions on island access. Increasingly, as a result of climate change and various other government decisions, access to some of the remote and in some cases uninhabited, but often with small habitations there, it's grown very difficult to get permission to go there. And it's taken a long time. It's bureaucratic exchanges to do it. There is a need, obviously, for countries to have regard for maintaining the environmental situation in their territories, and we have no argument with that. There is an increase in flight and boat charter costs, which have gone up quite considerably. And I think most of you will have understood the fact that there is now substantial increases in sending of QSL cards. It is costing an enormous amount. And this is just not possible for people coming into the hobby. Dealing with new technological developments, there have been a number of those in the last couple of years. We may have an opportunity to discuss one or two of those. But retaining the fun element, this is a challenge, retaining the fun element in contacting islands. Yes, the fun. Some facts about IOTA. The program is financially viable. There's no argument about that. It is financially viable. Neither I nor any board member is or has ever been paid. However, we have vacancies for a company secretary, for which we might be able to make some payment, and additionally a UK board member with commitment to and knowledge of IOTA. Sorry, I've pressed the wrong button. There we are. Awkward experiences. I mentioned the underwater islands one. The chap who suggested it actually came over about a year later, and he spent Christmas Day with us. And I remember while we were washing up, he asked me whether I was going to reply to his letter suggesting underwater islands. So, in fact, I said I would, and I did. Embarrassment of Anglesey is not 200 meters from the coast. It's been measured by Martin G3KMA, who went up there and they measured it, and it's not 200 meters. That did cause a lot of embarrassment, not least by the fact that subsequently, a year or so later, in his opening statement, the RSGB president actually mentioned the embarrassment of the decision of Anglesey for the IOTA committee. I kind of sank through the floor at that. The embarrassment of Fair Isle, a subsequent and a different RSGB president, mentioned in his opening speech that he had been on an island which IOTA had actually, having had it as a group, then deleted it. So that was another occasion where we had some embarrassment. What to do about disappearing islands and what to do about appearing islands? They do usually it's a result of volcanic activity, but what do you do in those circumstances? And what about the political problem? Scarborough Reef, which was activated 10, 15 years ago and longer with Chinese call signs, because the Philippines were not particularly concerned at that time. And then subsequently, the Philippines made a claim for Scarborough Reef. And so I'm not sure how it will ever get activated again. The Spratly Islands, that's a group which are owned by several countries in the South China Sea. And to do anything other than count them as a single island group would be controversial. And do I need to mention the Black Sea Islands? You've heard of Snake Island, Zmeni Island. That was the one which the Russians landed on, or at least tried to land on, and there was a confrontation with the Ukrainian people on the island, and that's an ongoing problem. I don't know what we're going to do about that. But these are political problems. So I must give a huge vote of thanks to the RSGB for guiding us through the early years, and to all who've helped keep the IOTA ship afloat for 60 years. I can talk about some of the problems for IOTA, technological changes, but what I've said may be regarded as enough for the moment, and I'm open to questions. So can I pass it back to you, David, to see what questions you've got? The last time I was here, I seem to recall there was discussion about rockall, and some of it was a useful chat about rockall. Anyway, back to you, David.
Thank you very much, Roger. An interesting insight into IOTA, and quite a lot of things to pick up there. Maybe I've got a few notes anyway. But of course, if you've got any questions or comments on IOTA, maybe experiences that you've had, or anything at all for Roger, please put them now onto BATC or Facebook. We've had a couple of comments already, Roger, so if I could start with repeating those to you. Paul Gunther, who's over in Poland, one of our members from some time ago, and he now lives there. But he says that he knew Jeff Watts from years ago. He also worked with Jeff Watts' son, Hedley Watts, G0BBV, for many years at Snelling's Television, which you may not know, but is a very well-known local company here that used to rent and still does exist and supplies TVs. He says, I'm still in contact with Hedley most weeks. So I think you said you only met Jeff actually once, but I don't know if you ever met his son or knew anything about him.
Yes, we invited him and his wife to, I think it was the 1994, that is the 30th anniversary convention at Windsor, and he came, and we had a long chat with him. I've also had one or two exchanges of emails with him, but nothing recently. But as I say, we did make a point of inviting him with his wife in 1994, 30th anniversary.
Lovely, yeah, and he must be very proud and pleased to see that, in memory of his father, all of his father's work still goes on and very strong from what you said.
Well, yes, I think so, and I'm not sure whether he's very active on the air, but certainly we pride ourselves with our contacts with him and his family.
Thank you. Yeah, well, if with your permission, Paul's watching this from Poland. I'll ask Paul on our behalf to pass our regards and your regards to Hedley. Paul G3VPT says, now in the 1950s, we at the Norwich Club operated on Scroby Sands. There were sand dunes on the island at that time. Some of the equipment was delivered by helicopter from a local RAF base, and the pictures can still be found on our club gallery. So I don't know if you know, have you heard of Scroby Sands, firstly?
Yes, I've heard of them. And I have to say, about 40 years ago, I think we did check them out and came to the conclusion that they did not qualify for listing for IOTA. So I think that, as I say, I haven't done it recently, but we did check them out a long time ago.
Okay, so I mean, from what Paul says there, there were sand dunes at the time. I don't think there's anything much at all to see there now. It'd be a very difficult place to go. You did mention earlier, you said if we had time.
Yeah, well, I would just say for that, we're very reluctant, increasingly so, I must say, to add new islands which have altitude above or a height above sea level of only 1 meter or little more than 1 meter, because there is a health and safety factor um, involved in operation from something which is so low in the ground that it could be flooded. I do accept that some of the islands of the 15,000 that we have listed may very well fall into that category as well. There's no way that we can check every single island, and we just have to leave it up to the common sense of people in whether they activate it or not.
Yeah, there's lots to choose from there, aren't there? By the way, Paul has come back and said, I'll pass on Roger's best wishes the next time he talks to Headley.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Give
did.
them my best regards.
I'm sure Paul will. Thank you. You did touch on something earlier on, which I'm going to pick you up on, if that's all right, because we haven't got any other questions or anything from any viewers at the moment. And that was that I think you were touching on possibly the idea of remote control, where initially the rules were very hard and fast, and you had to be on the island and activate it being on the island. But do I get it right that from your comment earlier on, that might have been relaxed a little bit with some of these remote control stations?
Yes, it started with remote in box, the RIB operations, and that then extended to operations, remote operations from 5,000, 10,000 miles away, using the systems which are now available. And I have got a note here which I wrote down, and to get the point across, it may be best that I read it out, because it would explain it much better from the point of view. First of all, I would have to say IOTA is not a national society program. It is a private company. It has a board, and the decisions of that board are what drive the policy of the company. So that is the basic situation as it is at the moment. But anyway, let me read this out. This may explain something. A lot has been said about the value of technological advances in amateur radio as the holy grail of ambition. In many things, this is an accurate description of the right way to go, but not in all cases. For award program managers, to follow a new development can present a challenge, not just with its compliance with the award rules, but with the effect it could have on the essence and meaning of the award program. Supporters of the RIB, remote in-box type of operation, a development that includes in most cases offshore station control and remotes, suggest 4 arguments in favor: reduction in operation costs, training of operators in pile-up control, circumvention of local governments' environmental restrictions, and better QSO prospects for QRP. Whether or not this type of operation reduces the costs or the size of the team on site, charter costs or costs of camping on the island, is perhaps arguable when set against other costs arising. It can be overstated. One cannot argue that the ability to operate from home at the sharp end of a pile-up from an unmanned station on a remote DXCC or IOTA, thousands of kilometers away, is not appealing, but one has to ask, where is this going? The argument about circumvention of a local government's environmental restrictions can also be overstated. Clearly, we have seen a growth in bureaucracy, but a way round can often be found. Only one island out of 10 or so where there has been such an operation recently raised any doubts that normal operation would not under any circumstances be allowed. And the crucial question, do these perceived advantages justify overturning several IOTA rules and the whole ethos of the IOTA program that operator performance is based on personal contact between the island operator. Sorry, I'll say that again. Do these perceived advantages justify overturning several IOTA rules and the whole ethos of the IOTA program that operator performance is based on personal contact between the island operator and IOTA chaser, land-based stations at both ends? Is there a case for IOTA to change its rules to accommodate every technological change when we don't know what the next one will be? We could end up with a telephone service instead of on-band DXing. I will continue with, can one stand in the way of technological advance? Are not the papers full of concerns being expressed about the dangers of technological advances in AI, artificial intelligence? Are any of us certain that in all areas of our society it will be a good thing? Cannot the same be said of social media, or indeed smartphones, or the arms industry? The answer is no. Let's look at the absolute holy grail for the de-expedition chaser in a particular imminent scenario. The chaser is not at home, or if so, is asleep, or is shopping at the local Walmart. The equipment is all lined up at home, unmanned, the frequency, the time window, the local pilot enabled, automatic QSO software switched on, ready for the QSO to be made. Half an hour later, chaser returns home, QSO in the log. You will say that this is ridiculous, as it's not possible. Perhaps not to many, but it already is, and it will surely be so for many within a few years. Well, you can stop it then. No, IOTA can't, if it has already slipped to the bottom of the slippery slope by accepting all these technological developments as they come along. Would an IOTA score be more than a notch on a stick then? That probably gives a flavor of the reply. It's not intended to upset or to be controversial. It happens to be the current view, I think, of IOTA and its committee.
Can I just ask, just for clarity, Roger, was that written as a response by the IOTA current board?
No, it is a personal view of mine, but it reflects, I think, the view of the board.
Yeah, sure. I guess we
have had board discussion actually on the question of the RIBs and remote operation. Yes.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
And the view was unanimous.
Yeah, I could sure. I guess offsetting that might be the world we're in now, where safety is a concern. You mentioned that, with some of the some of the shallow islands, if we can call it that, we've got very little above the sea level. But thanks for clarifying that. I'm going to end now. We haven't got any other questions from anybody, but I've got one question for you. Have you been on IOTA de-expeditions yourself over these years?
On a few, I went to the YESU on a trip organised by YESU in the Caribbean. I was there and was on operation there. Yes, on a few. I would not consider myself as an expeditioner. No.
Well, I mean, you've given an awful lot of time clearly to this. I was going to ask you what was your favourite island that you'd visited, but clearly you're you're happy just helping to run the organisation from your home.
Yes.
How long is it now? You talked about obviously the various timelines and things, but you said when you were on the HF committee, I think, and then you moved on to that. What date was that? When was that?
I will have been. It was 40 years ago.
Wow.
I was on the HF committee 40 years ago, and that's when I took over IOTA at that time in March 1985, and in March 2025 it will be 40 years. So I intend to get there anyway. I'm not sure thereafter, but obviously at age 86, you have to step down at some point. But I'll be there until, all being well, I'll be there until I've achieved the
I'm
40.
sure you will. With what you told me the other day when we did a brief technical rehearsal, and you told me what you'd been doing, I think you're going to be fine, Roger, running the IOTA side. Thank you ever so much for tonight's presentation and bringing us up to date with 60 years of IOTA, 40 of which you've been involved with, and that really is very commendable. And Jeff would be so proud and pleased that you've carried the mantle for all of that time. So thank you very much indeed for bringing NARC up to date with the IOTA programme.
Thank you very much. And I would just say that the programme, the purpose of the programme is to increase activity on the bands and fun, enjoying it, and as something which gives you enjoyment and something which is fun. And if we can achieve those two objectives, then we have done something. And I'm very grateful to you to giving me the opportunity to speak to the Norfolk Amateur Radio Club, and wish them all the best for the future and in all their activities and so on. Thank you very much and all the best. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much, Roger, and congratulations on your 40th anniversary next March. We'll be thinking of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
There we are. That ends tonight's presentation. Thanks again to Roger, G3KMA, talking to us about those 60 years of IOTA. Incredible. Just time to come back and tell you what's happening this week at NARC. On Sunday, it's the GB2RS News at 7 o'clock on repeater GB3MB. Also on that repeater on 7:30 on Monday, we've got the Monday Night Net. And please, anybody's welcome to run that. Tim has been running that for a very long time now, and would like others to sometimes contribute. So we don't own the airwaves, as I explained on the Monday Night Net this week. Nobody owns those airwaves at all, and certainly not NARC. So please do feel free to hop on the net if nobody else is running it, and run a simple net. That would be great. That's at 7:30 anyway on Monday, and at 8 o'clock the CW net on 3.543 megahertz as well. And then next Wednesday, November the 27th, we'll be meeting at CNS School, where the youngsters at Bright Sparks are going to be building a special Christmas decoration, and also it's the last day for paying for your NARC Christmas dinner bookings, but you can do that meantime online. And of course, we'd love to hear your stories and pictures and everything else. Do keep sending them to us. But until next time we meet in 2 weeks' time, from Tammy,
Bye-bye,
and from me, take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.